quorum, and I will call the meeting to order. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, and there's a resolution on page 3 for both sets, or I'm sorry, page 2 for both sets of the minutes. So I would entertain a motion for approval of those two sets of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Bussey, seconded by Commissioner Carter. Are there any additions or corrections? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved 5-0. The next item is Bloomington Central Station Residential Number 5, project overview. Holly, are you gonna, or Jason? Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Tonight, I will give you just a brief overview on Bloomington Central Station Residential Number 5, just based on the preliminary discussions that we have been having with McGuff Development. And we do have an action item consideration for the Commissioners as well at the end. Yep, I'm probably, if you could advance it. Thank you, Marit. So Bloomington Central Station, number 5 residential, will continue the investment in South Loop to transition the area from suburban to urban, and leverage the previous public investments that have been built within the area. BCS 5 will continue that momentum of adding residential units to South Loop to help supply the critical mass of population needed for the neighborhood grocery, restaurants, and future retail to economically survive within this area. To date, over $530 million worth of construction has been completed or is currently underway, and McGuff Development has almost over $300 million additionally planned for future phases. Within this past year, in 2023, the state legislature passed an extension of the 5-year rule for this TIF district, as well as they extended it an additional 5 years length to close in 2044. So of the development that has already occurred within the area, 6 projects are based on here. So the first being in 2006, Reflection Condos opened. Then we followed that up with the Indigo Apartments of 395 units. Fenley opened in 2020 with 402 units, and 40 units within that complex are affordable at the 80% AMI level. Carbon 31 recently opened up this month on October 1st, welcoming residents. That's a 403 unit facility, with which 36 units are affordable at the 60% AMI level. And then on November 1st, Oxendale's Market is planned to open within this area. So huge win for Bloomington Central Station and South Loop. And so the next phase that McGuff is looking at doing is BCS 5, which will be a 165-room active senior facility. And this is located just northeast of the Carbon 31 development, and actually directly north of where the Oxendale's Market is. So as I stated, BCS 5 is 165 units of active senior. As part of the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, instead of placing the affordable units within this project, they are electing to do the fee in lieu payment, which is outlined within the Opportunity Housing Ordinance. And part of that, they are looking to apply that fee in lieu to their next project, BCS 6, which is a proposed affordable project. Overall, the total project cost of this development is right around $67 million. This is preliminary. Ongoing analysis is currently being done. And in our preliminary analysis on the financials, staff has identified a present value gap of between 10 to 12 million, with which we are currently talking with McGuff Development of looking at a TIF PAYGO note. So all of the risk would be on the developer, and it would be up to the increment coming in from a Bloomington Central Station to pay that TIF note. Additionally, we'll continue to do a needs analysis and a recapture. And so one item I just wanted to quickly highlight is this fee in lieu payment option and the ability to dedicate it to a future project. And so Chapter 9 in our city code is our Opportunity Housing Ordinance. And one of the sections strictly calls out the ability to do a fee in lieu payment, with which this developer is doing. That current fee is $9.60 per leasable square footage of the building with which they are building. And then laid out within the incentives of the payment in lieu section is the ability for the developer to select if they want to use this fee in lieu at a future project. That can be a future project which will be undertaken by the developer, which will be undertaken by a different developer, or it could be selected to go into a NOAA property. And the intent of this section is to make sure that we are getting built affordable units. That's why this option is available. What we are seeing in a number of other communities, actually within the region as well as nationally, is they're starting to build up a fund in their payment in lieu and unable to actually get projects developed. Whereas this is being able to say, okay, developer that we're working with today, we understand you're going to do the fee in lieu now, but you're able to then use it on a future project with which you're actually going to build units, and that's a win for the city and a win for the developer. Next slide, please. So as I stated, we continue to do a preliminary needs analysis as to why this gap is needed. One of the areas that we continue to analyze are the market rents within this area. Right now, the market rents are slightly lower than what we are seeing in other similar projects within the metro. And a lot of that has to do with the limitations on the location within this area being adjacent to an airport, and the Minnesota River Valley kind of puts you in I'll say a box area. Additionally, interest rates and construction costs, everyone's reading the newspaper, interest rates are up, construction costs are starting to stabilize. However, they have not come down from that increased spike during the COVID era. Acoustical consideration. This development, BCS, is right in the airport runway, and so additional acoustic materials do need to be added to help buffer that sound of the airplanes running through, and these improvements do increase the construction costs overall for the development. And then lastly, Bloomington Central Station will continue the public infrastructure investment within this area. So they'll be looking to make the minimal public improvements which are required along 31st Avenue and 80.5 Street, which is the street that would run between Carbon 31 and this development. Next slide, please. So public investment, looking back at the historic public investment within the projects of Bloomington Central Station, they have averaged right around 13% of a public-private ratio. You'll notice that Carbon 31 was just above 20%. A lot of that was to assist in getting the grocer to locate within this area, as well as to help balance the gap that was created by the additional affordable units within that project. Looking at the low range of the potential public assistance that we're looking at for this project, the 10 million mark, puts that at about 17% public-to-private ratio. And then on the high range, if we're looking at 12 million, right around the 21.66%. Next slide, please. So similar to previous residential projects, we would look to do a recapture. This recapture will look to potentially recapture some of that public investment, so roughly 50%, and we would base this on triggers as far as if they were to sell within the first 10 years or an actual look back after the 10th year if they do not sell. This recapture would be based on 100 to 105% of that base pro forma. And then the funding with which we would look to close this gap would come from the Bloomington Central Station TIF. However, it would come from three sources within this TIF district. The first source would be the increment that this development generates, so the Bloomington Central Station 5. would generate approximately $5.3 million, which is 90% of the increment that is coming in. BCS admin TIF, we would be looking to close the gap of about $2 million from that account. And then the Bloomington Central Station master TIF. So this is coming from all of the projects with which there is no committed financial commitments of the money. And so it's starting to pool within this development. And we would look to tap that account at between $3 to $5 million. So both the admin TIF and the master TIF, we continue to analyze that, looking at projections and stuff. And right now, based on staff's projections and our municipal advisors, there is enough money in both of those counts to be sufficient to account for this development, but also to make sure that there is funding available for the future projects, because there still is vacant land within this area. Next slide, please.
Music.
I will not try to sing with them, but we do have a motion here on the screen, and I'm available for any questions, as well as representatives from McGough Development are here if you have questions directly for them. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jason. I mean, for those of us that have been on the board for a very long time, McGough has been a very good partner for us for many years, and has followed through and doing it, and including living through some very tough times with their reflections when they first started that and hit the market at exactly the wrong time. But I mean, I think we've got a project here, and we're all excited about the grocery store coming in and having a positive impact on things. So, Port Authority questions for Jason? Steve?
Here we go. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
So I like this project. I think it's a good project. The one thing that I'm kind of noodling on a little bit is kind of having interest rates be a factor in making a decision like this. And the reason is it kind of going against kind of where interest rates are headed. If we're kind of entering a new normal in interest rates, my concern is that that reason works for every project going forward. And so I'm interested in if the staff has some thoughts on kind of using interest rates as a factor like that, because I don't think we're going to get back to the day where you can go borrow like you could 2 years ago, and projects I think have to kind of make sense in the current economic environment. The other thing that I'm just think about too is that if we're at a peak in interest rates right now, because reading in the Wall Street Journal today, they were talking about some factors around that. If there's the potential for a project to be refinanced, then we're not in a position really to kind of benefit from that. And so I'm just interested in what you're thinking is around using interest rates as a factor.
Sure. Mr. President, Commissioner Peterson, talking with our municipal advisor, we're looking at all projects right now as far as where are these landing in getting the project to the finish line to be able to close on them. And so we do have to look at all factors as to why there is a gap, and one of them entails what is the interest rate that you're able to do. So a number of the projects a couple of years ago were coming at very low interest rates, and so there was little gap. Or no gap at all, and so projects were able to move forward under that economic standpoint. And so really it's a decision that ultimately is going to come before you and the City Council as to, do we want to continue to see momentum occurring within the South Loop area, or as well as the City of Bloomington entirely? And if we do, and at that same intensity level with which we have outlined in our comprehensive plan and our district plans, assistance most likely is going to have to be public assistance is going to have to be a push to get these projects to move forward in the climate we are today. There is the option that a number of communities do take as well, as to maybe we do just need to take a step back, maybe we don't give as much, or we wait for that market correction to happen. What can happen then, though, is we're trying to build the momentum out in the South Loop area right now, and as you just stated, we just created or gave a lot of assistance to move the grocery store forward. And so we want to make sure that we're still creating that environment that we have envisioned for this area, And we want to make sure that the residents and stuff are there to support the retail that we have envisioned for this area. And that would be one way to do that is to financially assist these projects.
Yeah.
One thing I would comment, Commissioner Peterson, is that's exactly why we have those recapture provisions. I mean, I don't think you can escape interest rates or consideration because we're looking at hurdle rates of return and we're looking at achieving a certain rate, and implicit in that is going to be an interest rate for something. But that's precisely why we have these things. And I can remember before we had these recapture provisions, I mean, that was something actually that a Port Authority board member who was a developer brought to our attention, and we said we will happily, move to that. And I think most cities have done that, but that's why that mechanism is there, and we would have an ability to capture it back.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. President. So thanks for the explanation regarding the payment in lieu of. For the other commission members, on last Monday night, the council looked at this and had this discussion. And one of the concerns that I brought up was the notion of basically one project paying for the next project, but it being in the same company. So basically a company paying itself to move a project forward as they're doing in this case. I certainly agree and understand, and you don't have to look far to find examples of communities that are just building up this pot of money in payment in lieu because that's what everybody wants to do, and then not have to deal with affordable housing. And I do understand that, and I appreciate the rationale behind that. I understand looking at the code and how we've got it set up, and it makes sense. It's legal, and I get it. It gives me pause, but I won't let it stand in the way of my support of this project. It just gives me pause that just from the eyeball test to see a company basically paying itself to move on to the next project. It just is something that I just had a little trouble with. But as I said, I appreciate the explanation, and I can support it based on the explanation you brought forward. So thanks for that.
Mr. President, Commissioner Bussey, and just preface, I didn't state, we did have actually another project within the city that is doing the same thing, the Ardor, so just to the east of here at the end of American Boulevard. It's currently under construction, a market rate apartment, 100%. They paid the fee in lieu here this spring, and they are planning to apply that to their future affordable project just to the east of that site, or excuse me, west of that site.
Okay, any other questions? Well, there's a motion that's contained on page 8, or in front of you, that I would entertain this motion. Commissioner Keller moves. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Bussey. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Jason. Okay. Next up, then, we have... We're going to have Mike come up and talk to us, Southtown Blight.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, today we're going to talk about the Southtown Blight Assessment and a preliminary development agreement with Krause Anderson. You've probably been hearing a little bit about this in the papers. I think it was in our Port Weekly already, an article about it. So, but I'll give you a little more details about what we're doing here. So, we contracted with LHB to conduct a blight assessment of some of the buildings at Southtown. Southtown being the shopping center, 494 Penn American, just north of our Penn American development district, or part of it. So they conducted an assessment. We did that to memorialize the ability to establish a TIF district, a redevelopment TIF district in the future. So that assessment looks at the requirements for the redevelopment TIF district, and by doing this resolution, we can establish a TIF district in the future. At this time, we're not establishing a TIF district. We typically do that when we have a development plan that we can assess what that gap is and figure out how much public subsidy we're willing to put into a project, but we don't have a development plan to assess. But the LHB assessment came back that it met the standards, coverage standard, 15% of the lot has to be covered, and to bring the buildings into compliance with code, the cost is more than 15% than if you were to replace it with a similar size and type of building. So this allows us 3 years to establish this TIF district and use the redevelopment TIF because it meets those requirements. Related to that, we're then entering into a preliminary development agreement, acknowledging that we did this assessment, that the developer intends to demolish the buildings before the TIF district is established, but knowing that they can be reimbursed if a TIF district is established. It does not establish that TIF district, making very clear. Again, it's just acknowledging that that is something that they will be pursuing in the future, and then we'll come to the normal process at a later date. Maybe not.
Gonna do that to the beat, Mike?
You'll notice we have two resolutions. So the first resolution does the blight assessment and kind of memorializes that and has the preliminary development agreement. The second resolution then acknowledges that we would reimburse for the demolition of the buildings if a TIF district is established. Again, they have 3 years to do that. That resolution also says that there's a maximum of $2 million that can be used for that demolition. I had one more slide that kind of, you're fine, that outlines where the developer, Kraus Anderson, would demolish. So at this moment, the buildings that they want to demolish pretty much as soon as possible is the former Toys R Us and the former Herbergers, so that kind of orangish area, the big building there that's pretty prominent. And then they do that probably this fall, winter yet. They want to get that done, like I said, as soon as possible. The condition of the buildings are not that great. There's a multitude of reasons why they want to tear that down. And then in the second phase, they would look to tear down kind of that bluish area. There are some existing tenants in there that their leases will lapse or they're working on moving them elsewhere in the shopping center. So that would likely happen in the spring. So those are the two buildings that they're talking about demolishing at first. We'll also be working on that redevelopment plan. Planning will be heavily involved with that. And when we have that development or plan, we can then start looking at the analysis on TIF and whether or not it makes sense to do a TIF district. What all those details will be hammered out when we have that detailed development plan. And with that, any questions?
Great. Questions for Mike? Just as historical note, many of you maybe don't remember, but Bill Yeager, who was with Kraus Anderson Construction, was on this Port Authority board for many years and was very instrumental and brought a lot of expertise to help us evaluate various construction issues and stuff. So at any rate, there's been a long history. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. A couple questions, actually.
Sure.
First, the more basic and general one. I know not too far to the east, we established a TIF district to get the power lines underground to spur development. Is there any discussion of that in this area as well? It'd be a good opportunity with buildings and pavement out of the way.
That is, Mr. President, Commissioner Bussey, that's a good question. I don't know that there has been that discussion yet. I know when we established that TIF district, that was for 700 American, that was special legislation that we lobbied for. And as the development projects came in, it was still just an exorbitant cost, even with the TIF, that there was a lot of risk associated with it, that they weren't willing to pursue that. But knowing that it does kind of bisect this significant parcel, that'd be something that the developer can maybe address if that's something they're thinking of, or maybe now they have an idea to pursue. But.
Okay. And then I appreciate that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then a bigger picture question. So farther down 494 to the west, we just saw a blighted project brought to the ground, and without any consideration by the Port Authority, without any big stories in the paper, without any discussion of TIF districts. So explain the difference to me. Why in one case it goes through this and in the other case it doesn't?
Mr. President, Commissioner Bussey, that is a good question. I don't have a whole lot of
questions tonight, right?
I don't have a whole lot of details. I believe you're talking about near Normandale Lake, where it was the big office tower. we don't have a lot of details on that project. We're not entirely sure what their plans are for that. They came in one day, a big surprise to the city that they were looking to demolish, and they have yet to come in with a development project. So again, I wish I knew what their economics were for that situation, but you know, geographic proximity is a little bit different. This is off of 494, and I think it will come down to what that final development is. The differences. They must have an idea of what they want to do in Normandale Lake. Kraus Anderson is still kind of working on what that final is, and it might be that they need little subsidy in the end. Doing their pro forma, we'll run that analysis to kind of figure out what that actual gap is. But this is, again, is kind of preliminary step that we don't want to demolish these buildings without taking this step and having that ability in the future if we need it. But to say that we definitely will need to utilize this, we can't say that at this point because we don't have anything to react to.
Appreciate that. I mean, more than anything, you look at those 3 properties, and those are high-profile properties right on 494, and I'm glad to see steps being taken to redevelop those properties, be clear about that. But it's just interesting the different factors that come into play, whether they're power lines, whether it's blighted properties, whether it's the use of a TIF district or not. It all kind of comes together as we look at these things and consider them, both for the short term and the long term, how we want to see that corridor in the city redevelop and see the redevelopment match what our goals are.
Yeah.
Commissioner Keller?
I don't want to immerse ourselves too much in this issue. We're talking about this rubble heap. Yeah. I'm a little confused, pardon my ignorance. But why wouldn't we know what was, I mean, do we know when someone's going to literally wipe the smile off the face of that?
It's being taken away
attractive.
gradually.
As much as I like the art placement in our community, I thought rubble wasn't perhaps the best canvas to paint it on. So,
they haven't come to the city yet. As far as I know, I don't know if staff has heard otherwise. They have not come with a proposal yet. The owners of the property, they own the property to the south, the Luxembourg. But they have not approached us with any plans yet. And, you know, I think it kind of highlights the situation where in this situation, if we do end up putting TIF or some other public assistance in there, we have then some negotiating power to, again, fulfill our planning documents, our Penn American District Plan, and kind of help implement that and further that vision a little bit further. Whereas because that project is privately owned, no public assistance, they're working completely private from us, and we have no knowledge of what they're working on. So
acknowledge, and I know the Port Authority and we're about development and all that kind of stuff. It just
it's rare these
halo
days.
all of that someone can say, you know, hey, about that building. It's going to be in a heap over here for, don't they need our permission to create such a thing and give us a plan for removing all of that? And
they did give us a demolition plan. They did not give us a plan on development. And like I said, it is rare these days that they don't.
The city is about, more generically about these sorts of compliances things, but I just, as a guy who lives really close here, I drive by there all the time in the morning. And what in the hell is going to be happening here? Because I don't remember a lot of construction sites, and we've been doing this for a long time, ignoring development funds, with that much stuff piled up someplace with no obvious, place in the future. And we were just talking about blight. I just kind of felt like this fit that part of the agenda nicely. It's not a very attractive.
Well, there's a site directly across 494 that has been sitting vacant. It's where the old health club was demolished a number of years ago. And so, I mean, you have that. But getting back to this particular project, what I view here is we're creating possibilities. We're not committing to anything at this juncture. To do any TIF or anything else, or they'd have to come back and put a plan together. And one of the things I think that we did see when we took the creative placementing tour earlier this year was the great need in that area for increased walkability and mobility with bikes and everything else, which hopefully would be part of any plan that we would see forthcoming. But you're dealing with a good-sized parcel of property there that obviously needs to be worked with, and so it's more reminiscent of a larger area than the single building that we're talking about. But
I think the link there that I really didn't come to grips with until while you were discussing what you just did is when we're doing these things, when we're taking the past off the street and thinking about the future, I think we need to be clear that the process by which we make that transition doesn't impede that transition. And so I think,
That's fair.
McGuff people recently said, I think emptiness breeds emptiness, and I don't want us to be. I want us to go about what we're doing opportunistically. I like the power thing, for example, but I want to make sure we're not creating spaces that we should go about it rather in a way that creates spaces that attract opportunity rather than what's the word we're searching for here? Suggest that it's not quite the right place for doing that. So,
I think one of the things with that whole Southtown site is that there has been a desire for quite a while to create more or less an agreed master plan, and obviously it's a iterative process between the developer and the city, and you look at, dream about what you'd like to do and come up with something, and it's not unlike what we have done with South Loop, where we started with a blank canvas and have moved it forward. So it is something that that center has served the city well for many years, but it's like anything else. It has to be updated and do. And I think to the extent that we can facilitate that and participate in a positive way, then it's a good move. So, Commissioner Carter?
Thank you. Just a quick clarifying question. So it looks like, was the study of the buildings, when the study was done, did it also include the auto dealership? But it looks like the auto dealership is not actually going to be demolished.
Correct, not at this time.
Okay, and was that also determined to be substandard?
Yes,
Okay, so it just might be at a later date.
yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? If not, we have, I guess, two motions that we need to make, and I guess we need to take them one at a time. So they're both on page 15 of your package or in front of you. So I would entertain a motion for the first motion on one on the
Mr.
top.
President?
Commissioner Peterson?
Move that we adopt the resolution designating buildings as structurally substandard within the city of Bloomington and approving a preliminary development agreement with Kraus Anderson Incorporated.
And do we have a second?
Second.
You want to take it, Commissioner Keller? Right. Motion made by Commissioner Peterson, seconded by Commissioner Keller. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And now we have the second motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move that we adopt a resolution authorizing reimbursement for demolition and related costs in connection with redevelopment tax increment financing district to be created for Southtown redevelopment project.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carter. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right. So now we're going to get on to Holly's presentation. Or Jan, or combination.
Let's see if this works.
You're going to double team us.
We're going to do this together. I guess it does. Okay. Jason, I don't know what your problem was. All right. So, good evening, President Erickson and commissioners. Tonight, Staff Accountant Jan Almquist and myself will be presenting to you the 2024 budget. You will see tonight our agenda includes the 2024 budget and context and highlights for the Port Authority, the General Fund and Development Fund budget requests, staffing, capital funds, challenges and opportunities, and then motion to approve those budgets. And so some 2023 context for us. In 2022, there was a study completed by the Housing and Redevelopment Authority that looked at the economic development services that they were completing as well as what the port was completing and decided that we should work together to maximize our strengths. So the Housing and Redevelopment Authority will now be concentrating on smaller housing projects and the housing continuum, while the Port Authority now concentrates on housing projects, multifamily, 20 units and above, roughly. That's not a strict rule, but that is our guide, as well as mixed-use development, commercial development, and we are now working citywide. And the Port Authority is now also including business attraction retention services, including small business services, and supporting creative placemaking citywide as well. In order to do that, it was determined that the port should turn on its levy for the first time. Last year, we actually utilized the HRA's levy at a level of $1.4 million that was transferred to the port for economic development use. This year, 2024, the port is planning to turn on its levy, which we discussed at our last meeting. Our 2024 budget will allow us to support our mission and work areas and to advance citywide strategic priorities. You'll see the Port Authority provides orderly economic development throughout the city of Bloomington through development and redevelopment work, business assistance, and creative placemaking. And we are aligned with Bloomington's strategic priorities and the Bloomington Tomorrow Together plan, including a community with equitable economic growth and connected and welcoming community. In 2024, we have a number of ongoing initiatives that we started last year that we're hoping to continue to support with this budget. This includes completing our 5-year Economic Development Action Plan for the Port Authority, and our RFP for that work was released last week. That budget is in 2023, but the work will mostly be completed in 2024. We'll be expanding commercial and mixed-use development and redevelopment support, as was just presented to you, including TIF applications and grant assistance citywide. Facilitating the administration of Bloomington's Opportunity Housing Ordinance, and we added a staff person this year for that work. Offering business assistance services to small businesses and early-stage entrepreneurs, and offering creative placemaking citywide. In 2024, we will also be adding new programs, including development and operational funding for the planned Small Business Center, $296,000 for that. Allocated development grant funding to assist development projects citywide, it's $100,000, and facade improvement grant programs to assist businesses in updating their exteriors at $150,000. And so just a bit more context before we get fully into the budgets. Just want to remind everyone that the Port Authority's General Fund and Development Fund are being presented both together and separately. Together, they provide a full picture of the Port Authority's expenses, and separately, they provide an understanding of how each budget is allocated based on the allowable use of its funds. The general fund may be used for expenses in South Loop District that are not specific to individual projects or TIF districts. It is primarily funded by interest earned on the city's South Loop Development Fund. Up to and including 2022, it was the only budget approved by the Port Authority Board on an annual basis. Then the development fund may be used for broader economic development purposes across the entire city of Bloomington. That is a new fund for us. In 2023 and 2024, its focus has been on supporting smaller businesses in Bloomington with new or expanded programs, and it's funded by a levy on property owners. Both the levy and the budget must be approved by the Port Authority Commission. Staff time between the two is allocated based on estimates of how many hours they'll spend on certain projects or work areas, and we represent that in the two budgets accordingly. 2023 and 2024 budgets have been and will continue to be subject to some variation as the port has expanded its services and staff significantly over the past 2 years. At this time, these are our best estimates with the information that we have and the programs we are planning, but over time we anticipate that the budgeting will become more predictable. And now I will turn this over to Jan Almquist, our staff accountant, who will present the port's 2024 budgets.
Thank you. Sorry, as I try to move this over. So this year, President and Commissioners, I want to point out that this year we actually have changed the format just slightly from what you've seen in the past. Instead of bringing the transfers in and transfers out below the expenditures and revenues, we have actually incorporated them with the revenues and expenditures, hoping that it will make it a little bit more readable, easier for you guys to look at and see. So Holly has gone through an awful lot of what we're going to present on this slide here, which is the Porch General Fund and Development Fund combined. I do want to make one note, on that, is the change, it says from 2023, that's 2023 budget to 2024 budget. So on the revenue side, the transfers in, we are asking that it be $100,000 more than what it was in 2023, so it's $850,000. The next two lines are actually the levy and the transfer in from the HRA that we have in 2023 was 1.4, and the levy now will be up to 1.5 in there. Salaries, wages, and benefits are just as Holly had mentioned to you, that overall between the two of them, we're asking for about a $44,000 increase on that. Your material supplies and services has actually gone down to, and that is really more because we are separating out the projects so that you can see them in a little more easy manner than what we did in the past. So that is, at this time, we're saying it's about $263,000 that we are asking for 2024. I will point out one thing in here is a small business center construction. We do have that in 2023 as estimate of $300,000. That will be truly if the estimate will be coming back to you if that goes forward yet this year, so that you can do a budget adjustment on those items.
That's what I was going to ask, so that would be a budget adjustment.
That is correct. Yep, those will be a budget adjustment if it needed. So your support and space and occupancy is just those things that the city passes through to the Port Authority. And then we also have transfers out to the Rosa admin and the American Square admin. Those are, brand new TIF districts that we are either proposing or have started, and those do not have TIF coming in that will cover the admin. So we have been transferring out those. In the future, as admin comes into those districts, we will pay back these loans. And then there is a transfer out to the Creative Placemaking Fund of $200,000, which was what we had in '23, and we are proposing again in 2024. So the total expenditures between the two of them is $2,354,000. Revenues are just slightly under what the expenditures in this case, so we'd be using a little bit of the fund balance that we have. So the estimated fund balance as of the end of 2024 is about $66,000 between the two.
And Jan, one thing I mentioned to Holly when I was going over this slide a little bit is it would be nice to have the fund balances for each of the years so you can see what's moving. Now, we don't have much of any fund balance here. We never have had, but for some of the other funds in particular, it's just helpful to be able to see how they transfer through. So,
and I do have that information with me.
It's something that's more, I think, for the future, and again, we can look at it, but it's just nice to track what we've got available and where it's going. And, being a bean counter, I guess
And President Erickson, I guess do you want that in the specific fund, or do you, like here, I'm putting in like 66,000, which is just obviously rounding amount. I guess I'm just trying to get
If you have the funds there, I mean, you obviously come up with something to have the estimated fund balance for the end of the year, whatever.
Oh, certainly.
Used to do that is perfectly appropriate for the other years. I mean, this fund is one we know we never have had much of any money in to carry over. It's just
Right. And in the general fund, as we'll get to, we typically try to keep that down to as minimal as we can, simply because that money comes from the South Loop Development Fund interest. So we only transfer over. So there's typically not much of a fund balance in there, in that one. So here we go to the general fund in particular. We have that again, just as we were speaking of the transfer in from the South Loop Development Fund. This year, we are going to be asking for a bit more than what we had originally budgeted. This really comes down to the expo costs. We did have some expo costs that have come into, which have made our material supplies and services more than what we originally budgeted. We had some money come in 2022 of $250,000. There was a grant that came in from, I believe, the state. And that has been used for some of those, but we will be coming back before probably at the beginning of the year, asking for a budget adjustment once these numbers are a little bit more secured as to what they are, because that is materials and supplies in 2023 is estimated to be higher than what we originally budgeted. But they are holding fairly steady, I would say, in 2024. Going back up one line, which was the salaries, wages, and benefits. Again, some of this, it's going up by 60,000, almost 61,000, but it's because we're getting a better idea what should be in the development fund as compared to the general fund. So it's just taking a little bit of time and experience to see that. Your support services, again, the same thing. I think we just estimated a little bit high last year in 2023, so it's coming down a little bit, and then the transfers out to Rosa and American Square that I just spoke about before. Okay. Here's the development fund. Again, the difference of about $100,000 in your tax levy as compared to what the HRA is bringing into us this year. Salaries and wages are actually going down, kind of offset what we were just talking about where we were trying to do that. And so we're asking for about $523,000 with that. The material supplies and services, again, that's going down, but it's basically brought up by the items as they're listed out more to the small business centers, leased operating costs and all that. Holly will be speaking a little bit more to what those next four lines with the small business and the development center and the front door revitalization. I think she's actually even already brought a little bit to that. So this is, again, revenues, and what we're anticipating is the fund balance is approximately $40,000 on this. So that's what I have for these two, and at the end of the presentation, we will be asking for approval of the resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, we'll go on. Just a bit more detail about those development fund changes. 114,000 reduction in material supplies and services. We've said several times that is really being compensated for by adding specific line items for new programs. So of the 296,000 dedicated to small business center operations, those are first year estimates, including 98,200 in space and occupancy fee and 198,000 for staff and programs. We anticipate refining that over time as we get to know what the actual cost will be for the center. The 150,000 for facade and site improvement grants is a new program for the Port Authority, but a common program in other cities that allows us to supply matching grants to small business or property owners that may have an aging facade or wish to add a patio or some kind of visual improvement to their storefronts. You have to have a brick and mortar to use this, of course. And so our hope is to target that to some of the commercial nodes that we've heard would like to see a little bit more attention throughout the city. And finally, the 100,000 in development project grants. We're not specifying yet how we use that. It may be for studies, it may be for assistance for smaller projects, but we wanted to have that amount of money available in the first year as we learn how we can be of service to our business community as we embark on changing the space of the Port Authority from just the South Loop to the rest of the city.
Well, and I think one of the things that came up when we discussed this before is that this, in one sense, is really an equity issue, because if you're a big construction project or something, you come in for TIF, you come in for something else. But a lot of these people in smaller projects didn't have access to things. So I think the concept here is good and important.
Thank you. All right, and also we wanted to clarify a bit about the 2023 budgeted Port Authority team. So the port has been growing quickly over the last 2 years. Prior to 2023, we had 5 employees. In 2023, the budget included 5 new people, and those are indicated by the stars up above. That was 1 new Port Authority administrator to focus on small business services, 2 new economic development analysts or specialists to work under that administrator, 1 new housing development specialist to be shared staff with the HRA and administer the Opportunity Housing Ordinance, and then 1 office support specialist. And staff salaries, benefits, and space and occupancy were paid for by a combination of general fund and development fund based on the work areas, as we explained them before. And the creative placemaking director organizationally sits within the Port Authority but was not included in the port budget for that year. So that was a total of 9 FTE, including the placemaking director, 2 shared employees, and then 2 outside staff with accounting and legal that we pay for a portion of. So 2024, our headcount is actually consistent, but we did some reshuffling. And so those that are in the dark navy color are people who have been hired. Those in the lighter background color are people that we are actively working on hiring. We have created a position of placemaking specialist that's circled in orange that was previously allocated as an economic development analyst. We just shifted them over. And then we are assuming 20% of the creative placemaking director's salary, which was previously paid for by the city's general fund. So that's a little bit of why you saw a bump in the salary costs for this coming year. So again, it's still 9 full-time employees, including the placemaking director, 2 shared staff, and then the 2 shared support staff. Okay. Any questions on the staffing? All right, so let's move on to our other port funds. Jan Almquist will be presenting them to you to give additional context to the Port Authority's 2024 budget.
President, Commissioners, I think you guys have seen this before. I present it every year. The items in the purple are our capital project funds that we have in the Port Authority. Those include, of course, the Mall of America, your Rosa, your TIF, American Square, and all your Bloomington Central Station ones there. And of course, within their capital project, there's also the administrative funds. And in the Mall of America, we have the 2 different types of TIF, the original type of TIF that we had, and then the TIF by legislation that we had at one point. I am, below the gray line. Those funds are the ones that we will be asking and that we have to do budgets for. Above those purple ones are actually the ones that I'm just going to present those this evening for your information, not really for, they do not need to be approved, as capital projects do not have a need for approval, because as projects come forth, you guys have to see them and approve them that way. The one in green on the South Loop, that's just explaining how the money actually gets down to the Port's General Fund, and where and those other lines say, hey, we're giving money to the Rosa and the American Square, and eventually, hopefully, American Square, and Rosa, to be honest with you as well, will give the money back, the Port's General Fund, so it'll relieve that. So that's pretty much what that slide is telling us.
And Jana, and I think it's just important with this slide, and when we talk about all the individual ones, that most of this money is dedicated to specific projects. I mean, I've
That is
used the word
correct.
fenced, and I think people look at it and they say, well, we have all this money, but the money that we have that's really discretionary is very limited. I mean, again, I guess you could say the $1.5 million is more discretionary, and you've got some administrative TIF, but the rest of it is really tied up. And I think it's just important that we communicate that to the public, that when we look at these dollars, that they are, in effect, dedicated for purposes.
Yes, President Erickson, thank you for pointing that out. It is very true, which is why, one of the reasons why we're saying that these are capital project funds, so they really have to be used for a capital project of some type. So the first fund that I'm going to present here is the Special Projects Fund. This was set up many years ago. It's the destroyed value, as you may recall, what the destroyed value is for the Rad Blue and JW Marriott. Thank you. Sorry. Thanks. And so the money is just been sitting in there to be used, and we are hoping in 2024 that there will be a Skyway, the Met Center parking in Skyway, and that will use that up. We'll use that up right away and clean this fund up so that there won't be anything left. And there. The next fund that we're going to be going to is actually the administrative and reserve funds for both the Mall 1 and Mall 2 TIF areas. So we have some money coming in for interest earnings. The market value adjustment, we separated that out simply because it looks pretty awful when it comes back as a negative interest. This is that the market value at the end of the year, by accounting practices, we have to mark all of our assets back to the market value that we could get if we had to get rid of them at the moment on 12/31. As a general rule, well, pretty much a rule is that we hold investments until maturity. So although we have to show it in our financial statements, it is not a realized loss that we have in here.
So this is strictly because interest rates have gone up, and so
yeah,
you have to mark it to the current interest rate.
yeah, and our investments, and I do hold that part of my hat as well. Trust me, we bought the best we could at the time we did it a couple of years ago, but let's just say that I wish I could have gotten 5% 2 years ago, and we don't. So, and then we have the transfers in from the Mall 1 and Mall 2 TIF districts. That's that 10% that comes in here. Expenditures in this is really your professional services, again, and your wages and salaries that comes in with those. Professional services, we estimated $170,000, and wages and salaries of $151,000. New this year, though, is, well, I shouldn't say new, but it is in 2023, and in 2024 is the SIC Phase 2. So these are the associated costs for the land write-down and the development of the structured parking for that SIC development.
So Jan, are we limited to using these administrative funds in South Loop, or can they be used in other areas?
No, these are in, I'm sorry, I
think it's, I think
it is
it's
out
restricted to South, well, it is,
yeah.
I think it's restricted to South Loop.
Yeah,
Julie says yes, yeah.
Yeah,
That was my recollection, but, okay.
I would have said yes, and then I would have been like,
Well, it's
So-
good that we have Julie here to say yes.
yes. So, okay, the next funds are, these are the Mall of America capital funds that have come in for the TIF that we've had coming in all the time, and the legislation TIF, the special legislation TIF that we had. The one thing that I do want to point out with this is you'll see in 2022 that $95 million transfer out. We did separate those funds. The legislature gave us the authorization to take $95.2 million and set it aside for some other type of, different ways of using those monies than what has been normal for the rest of it. So the fund balance, if you wanted to look at this, as President Erickson has said, if we would have had it, that fund balance would have dramatically dropped, but it comes over to the next slide that we have in here. So at this time, we have, $25,000 for 2024 for professional services, the Ramada land. That's usually seeding and bird mitigation that we have out there, and then the transfers out of the fund, the TIF fund. So the TIF fund still will be coming into the regular capital funds. So that's what that one is for. The next one is the spend plan for the Mall of America. That's that $95,000 that came in. 71 million came in from the mall, and 24 million came in from the Mall 2 project. We do have expenditures for the adjoining lands TIF loan that was out there, 555. These are expenditures that we have given to her. 555 has asked for reimbursement for their pursuit of the water park. So, and we are again asking that development and public improvements for the water park, we're putting it out in 2024. If those happen, those are what's going to be in there. Of 38 million for the development and 20 million for the public improvements, giving us an estimated fund balance of approximately $27 million.
But those numbers are not legally committed in a sense. What
No.
they are is that these are staff designations, as I understand, and that we're thinking these dollars would have, and for them to be actually utilized, it would have to have some action, that we would have a plan before us to say, yes, we will expend on these various things.
Yes, President Erickson, these were based on the 2022 agreement.
Right. No, I mean, I think it's very helpful, and it's good. It also just reinforces the concept that these aren't funds that we can just use for whatever we want. They're dedicated to something, and these are it's kind of the wish list that they have right now, but we're going to have to work through and see.
So the next one that we have here is the Rosa Admin Fund. We are working on this district to get it up and running. And so at this point, they originally, Rosa, when they came in there, gave us some money to start this district, but it hasn't been enough for all the staff time and the administrative work that we've done. So that's where we're saying that we feel in 2024 that we'll need about $9,000 for the professional services and salaries. Again, minimal balance at the end of the fund balance at the end of 2024. We aren't going to be bringing in more than what we need. So that's where that comes from. Same type of thing going on with American Square. Now, this district was certified in February of 2021. And so, again, TIF has not come in so that we can take that 10% for the admin. And so we are asking that the general fund give them $10,000 in 2024 for professional services of about 25 and the wages and salary. And there was a bit of a fund balance before, so that'll be come out there. And anticipate the ending fund balance, it will be a negative, or excuse me, not a negative, will be a zero. Next one is our Bloomington Central Station Admin Fund. And I know that you guys are probably sick and tired of me saying it from past years, but hey, guess what? It's in the positive.
Yeah, we were happy when that occurred.
I know. So again, here we have transfers in from, we have some interest earnings coming in, transfers in from Lenore, from Fenley, Carbon 31, and the BCS funds that were not otherwise designated, and that come in for that, which is going to be, giving us projected revenues of approximately $471,000 in 2024. We have some professional services of $20,000, salaries and wages that will be coming out of there of 113. And this is that BCS 5 public improvements that Jason was speaking with, that, we would be, if this project goes through or goes forward, that we'd be trying to take some money out of here to help cover some of that deficit on there. So that's what that $475,000 is.
And I think all of the McGuff projects are all pay-go notes, right?
Yes. There was, we'll come to it in the next one, but in Lennar there was, we did have some stuff that has now been taken care of that was not on the pay-go note. So here is the capital projects, and I wish I could remember right off what Jason called it, but basically these are the original BCS projects that were on here. And there is some pay-go notes on this stuff as well. So we have, anticipated coming in for property tax increment is $1.8 million. And of course, then we have some interest earnings and the market value adjustments on those in 2024. We do have the BCS counted value earned and of about $590,000. The carbon 31 counted value earned is about $1.1 million on this, because carbon 31 has not brought forth as much as we are wanting to pay them out for that counted value. So we're using this in there. And then there'll be a transfer out for the BCS admin fund of $180,000, estimating at the end of 2024 a $3,670,000 fund balance. Here is the debt service for the BCS Lennar. We did have some debt when we bought, when we went through with that. We did issue some bonds on there. This basically gets the money first. Any money that TIF comes in gets there so that it's allocated to this fund first and foremost. We keep in the fund balance what we're going to need for the following year's principal and interest, so that we always have enough of a fund balance to cover for the following year on that. So we do have about $530,000 coming in 2024 for from TIF to cover this. Professional services, there's always a little bit of money that we have to pay of about $200. And then we have interest of $172,000 and principal of $360,000. We're anticipating there will be about a $549,000 fund balance that'll cover the following year, 2025's. Next, is the BCS Lennar capital projects. And on this one, we do have, this is where I was speaking a little bit of what we had, the special assessments for McGough and Lennar. If you look in the expenditure, but those have been taken care of. They have been paid off. We do anticipate about $670,000 in TIF coming in for this particular part of it. And then we have a transfer out. Now you'll notice that the transfer out looks a little bit high as compared to the property tax increment, and that is because we can't do a transfer out of a debt service fund. So we're taking the money that came in under the debt service, the tax increment, and we're using that 10% from this debt service fund plus the capital projects, and that's what we transfer back out to the admin fund.
Is it safe to say that you've looked at this from both sides now? Is that what? Thank you very much.
I promise
Well
I only
played.
have a couple more left. So here's your Fenley project. We're looking at $1.2 million coming in for TIF in 2024. And guess what's going out? $1.2 million. So it's going to be about a zero balance. And the same thing is going into carbon 31. I'm going to just back up a moment here. We do have the pay-go note of almost $10.6 million for this one. And that's what that $1,080,000 for the Fenley is going out to, is on that. And in carbon 31, there is a almost $23 million pay-go note on there that would be, if they expend that, or we have to, enough comes in TIF, it'll be going out to there. So that's approximately $360,000 that we anticipate that would be going out there. And with that, it concludes the projections. Is there?
All right.
Are there?
Applause.
Yeah. No. Is there any questions that I can answer on any of these
Questions for
projections?
Jan? Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I promise we are wrapping up at this point. So as we present and request your approval for our budgets for this year, wanted to remind you of the challenges and opportunities that we are working with, especially as We open up this new territory of working citywide. We now have a levy that we can apply to wider economic development services. We have a little bit more discretion with the way those funds, though they're not our largest funds, are used. A reminder that we are dealing with the cost of construction and interest rates as a dual challenge. One of our developers supplied these numbers to us that since 2018, they have seen material costs increase by 57% and labor increase by 27%. And so we do expect that developers will be seeking additional public assistance. Remote work trends are absolutely a challenge. No one really knows how that is going to play out in the future, in the long term, because of COVID, but we do anticipate they will continue to impact the office market. And we do have limits of available funds, and that point has been made abundantly clear this evening. Most of our funds are limited to projects in the South Loop area or very specific project areas. Time is going to be needed to change how funds are used or build up reserves in our development funds so we can have a bit more discretion in the future. But there are opportunities, positive things to look at. We are exploring what it will be to diversify Bloomington's economy. There is current significant state and national interest in supporting high-tech manufacturing, in which Bloomington has quite a lot of strength. We have continued interest in growing our existing tourism industry. We have over 9,000 hotel rooms, which is not an insignificant number for a community of this size. And then new capacity to help businesses of all size. Adding staff to work with those smaller businesses and give them more attention has definitely been able to mean we can work with a greater diversity of businesses. We are trying to increase equity in the services we provide by rethinking the way we do outreach, communications, and programs to ensure that we reach and appropriately help business owners of all backgrounds. And I am particularly excited about our internal and regional collaboration. Internally, we're working with other city departments to ensure that we're developing a quality place, looking at topics like on-street parking, pedestrian-centered design, and diversity of design. I know we asked questions about architecture before. Improving our customer service, proactively helping new businesses as they solve their permitting challenges and really trying to help them along and get involved early. We're talking to brokers and landlords and saying, send people to us early so we can help them. And then working with our regional partners like Greater MSP, Chambers of Commerce. There are quite a number of them. I didn't realize. Deed, Medical Alley, and others. And then, of course, our geographic expansion. We can use our placemaking, facade and site improvement grants, and other tools to attract investment and make a visible difference across the city. So, a quick reminder of where we are in our timeline of fall budget action steps. Tonight, we are asking you to adopt the general fund and development fund budgets. On December 5th, we will ask you for approval for our final levy request. December 18th, we go to City Council for our final Port Authority budget and levy requests. And then December 20th, we will turn all this over to Hennepin County for that final levy submission. And so here we are one more time. We are asking for you to approve this evening the general fund and the development funds for 2024. Do you have any questions about these before we move towards a motion?
Holly, I had asked you, I just would like a quick update on where we're at on the Small Business Center.
Absolutely. So the Small Business Center, we had a presentation a few months ago, President Erickson and Commissioners. We had a presentation a few months ago looking at the progress for the project so far, and at that time you did ask some questions about the construction costs. And as you've seen, costs are escalating across the board. So right now the project team is taking a harder look at those costs and also the funds that will be required to build that building. And so you should expect to get a new presentation to you probably at your December meeting. They will be looking at there are a number of things involved in why that renovation has become more challenging to retrofit that building. Things from the slope of the floor, as it used to be set up for a fire station that needed to drain, to the roof that needed to be replaced, to the upgraded mechanicals. You'll get more information on that, and we can definitely at that time allow you to ask some questions about the more discretionary elements like the cladding on the building.
Great, thank you. Well,
If I could, Mr. President, I'd appreciate your comment about working with regional partners. It's almost like within the last 18 to 24 months, we all kind of discovered each other and realized the possibilities that were there. But I think it has to do with a number of different things. I think the Expo bid played a huge role in that people kind of were more aware of what we were doing here in Bloomington. But I think in particular the work that staff is doing. I think Bloomington has really got a strong reputation now as a staff that looks for ways to get things done, is becoming easier to work with and more creative in what they're doing, and just willing to get out there and get the work done. And it makes a huge difference. So hats off to staff for the work that has gone on, and looking forward to the increase in staff size and the increase in staff capacity, and excited to see what might come from that as well. So well done.
Thank you, Commissioner Bussey.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Carter?
Thank you. So I'm just overall very excited about the direction that we're heading. And one of the line items around kind of some, I don't want to say discretionary resources, but you made a comment about we're learning, right, about what businesses across Bloomington are going to ask us for or need. And I feel confident saying that we may have needs or desires that outpace the resources that we have. And so I don't know, maybe this will be included in the 5-year action plan, but how do we prioritize? Like, what's the criteria that we're going to use if we have 3 or 4 projects that come in front of us asking for assistance, but we have a limited amount of resources? How are we going to really make those decisions in a way that's in alignment with our strategic plan and the action plan and all of the other things that we need to consider? So not really looking for an answer right now, but just kind of raising the issue because as we've expanded our scope of work to include the whole city, I just assume that that's going to be an issue that might be in front of us soon.
Other questions, comments? Well, if there's none, we have a motion on page 31, which I would entertain.
Mr. President, I would move we approve the resolution adopting the 2024 Port Authority General Fund budget and Development Fund budget.
Do we have a second? A second by Commissioner Keller. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And do we have anything else that we need to discuss tonight?
No, President Erickson, but I do apologize for the sound conflicts this evening. I know they were distracting.
Well, we thought that you just had arranged special entertainment for us. I mean, we're...
You notice every agenda item had a special song. It's kind of like an ABBA film.
I mean, I noticed at one point somebody was with the cursor. I guess it was Jason that was kind of... And maybe that was from bouncing the baby up and down or something. He's used to it. All right. We are adjourned, if nothing else. Thank you.